There's two things that you mentioned. The MP Chris Bryant. I say there's lots of vitriol coming out, and we haven't seen that kind of stuff openly in Parliament about members of the royal family, working or not, or disgraced or arrested or not. We've never ever seen that kind of behaviour. They could have said that before. Let's be honest. This has been going on for 16 years. It feels like there is a massive pile-on at the moment. There's no libel laws in Parliament. They could have weighed in before. And what that brings to me, the fact is that the scariest thing, or probably the most damaging thing for the royal family, is if there's a disappearance of deference.
Absolutely.
If it's now acceptable to speak about Andrew, and then what next? The King, then William. I mean, that for me is what I think would be the biggest fear for them.
Because how do you put that back in? That's out. If this is the way we're speaking, and as you say, it was very strong language. If that is happening, and that criticism is something that becomes normalised, well, where does it end? And where does it end? Where do the calls for transparency in different areas, where does that end? And so much of the monarchy exists on the way that there is some mystery around it. It's the majesty of it. And so if this continues and a lot of of course, I do believe all due investigations should be unfolding when it comes to any allegations of wrongdoing, and that needs to be looked at. But more broadly, the royal family, where does it all stop in the calls for transparency in any direction?
Because they've got to wait for the police investigation, obviously.
Yes.
So
you can imagine.
Carry on with engagements.
Yeah.
Keep calm and carry on.
Yeah, keep calm, carry on. I don't think it serves anyone well to open the floodgates of undue criticism. If members of Parliament think there is something to say, whether that's about funding or whether that's Andrew's role as a trade envoy, that is absolutely agreeable. But however, are you going to open the floodgates of just complaining about issues with the royal family? It's a pretty dangerous path.
Generally, I think the royal family are probably in one of the most dangerous positions they've been, maybe since the death of Princess Diana.
Yeah,
I really think there's the impact-wise. We're talking about endpoint. Will this ever end? I think Andrew's probably feeling the same. Will this ever end? But line of succession. So this has been muted over the last couple of years. What else can you do to punish Andrew? But the government has said that at the end of the investigation, they will consider legislation to remove Andrew from line of succession where he's number 8. Is that just politicking?
I thought, it's a bit performative that did it need to be said at this week? It seems as though there are just, well, what can we say next? How can he be punished? I think that the picture on every single newspaper in the world and news site, everybody has seen it, tells you a lot about the situation that the royal family and indeed Andrew finds himself in. There is a calling for Andrew to be punished, until the end of time. But I think we need to have a bit of perspective and say, let the police investigations take their course. There are, as I said, several being assessed at the moment, and it's up to the royal family as well. And these things will take a lot of time, so it's almost giving false hope that it will happen overnight.
I mean, as the representative of Australia, your Prime Minister has come out and said that
it's not like Albanese to get out the blocks very quickly on a royal issue.
Yes, a self-appointed representative of Australia. I think our parliamentarians might have an issue, but that's fine. I'll take this one, guys.
Did you think it was performative from Albanese when you heard it? I mean, was there a clambering for him to make a statement
I would say
on behalf of the government?
So many people have been asking about the Australian mood in this situation, because obviously we've got the temperature over here in England, and I would say it's very similar. And there is a catastrophe would have to occur for Andrew to ever become king. Obviously, sure. 8th in line, he's not going to become the king. But I can understand that there is also among the public, every time we're hearing a report about it, it is reminded that he's 8th in line to the throne. And just the very principle of that is something that infuriates people. And that is very much the sentiment in Australia, as I think it is here. I think that Anthony Albanese getting involved at that point, why not? Look, he's laid down the cards. Obviously, I don't think anyone thought that there would be opposition to a proposal to remove Andrew from the line of succession. He's made the point that Australia will not stand in the way of that. I don't think it's a surprise. But as you say, is it completely necessary for the conversation to happen right this second, now that the arrest has just happened and there is a legal process that now needs to be followed? I don't know if it is.
I think that's what needs to take precedence.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Andrew should be removed from the line of succession. There's no way he should be a Councillor of State even though the language had been adapted to say that it would only be working royals. Well, just take him out of the picture. People don't understand this, so they will view inaction as the royal family don't have an appetite to do it. But I think that certainly the police investigation should absolutely take precedent, both for the authorities and for the royal family as well.
I do understand the optics though, and I completely agree with what you're saying, but it is also the optics right now where it does feel quite chaotic. There are all these stories about Andrew. We've also, it now is being collaborated with all these stories from the years past about, him making staff members cry, him being a very difficult person to work for. Obviously these are not criminal allegations, but it more broadly paints a picture of a man who lives a life of entitlement. And I think that is part of the optics of, that scramble of thought of what can we do to prove that we take this so seriously in the line of succession and the fact he's in line to the throne, however far back he is. I do understand that why people are calling for that.
But that's bad for the royals, because if you start scratching the surface of privilege and entitlement.
Exactly.
And it's difficult because, of course, the King and the Prince of Wales live in palaces and castles. Of course, William and Catherine have moved to Forest Lodge, but that's the perception, isn't it? Fly around in helicopters, have money at your disposal to go to Mustique if you want. But if you start scratching the surface of this, then there'll be more questions to be asked. Well, why don't you get a train? Why do you fly in helicopters? And I do think that's a pretty dangerous situation for the royal family.
It is dangerous, and you're right with that as well, because if you get to the 8th in line, you think, well, he's never going to become king.
Sure.
So why have a 9th? Why have a 10th? Why have 11th? You'll just salami slice large elements of the royal family, and what will be left with.
Exactly.
Now, there was a poll. So apparently, I'm told that support for the monarchy has fallen to 45% after this. Everything that we will move on from Andrew to maybe some lighter stories from the week. But with 45% support for the monarchy, are we heading towards the end of the monarchy or vast changes in the monarchy? What do you think, Bronte? Is a revolution in the air?
It is so hard to tell where this all ends. It is so hard to tell where all this ends. And because of that, it's impossible to say where their popularity lands at the end of all of this process. With that said, it's a critical juncture for the royal family. It is a crisis like I don't think they've ever seen before, as you said. But I think there is a way through it. I don't think it's necessarily the end of the monarchy. I think that people do separate Andrew from the royal family. They see William and Catherine out on engagements and they're not thinking, oh, well, they're all cut from the same cloth. I don't think that people have that perception of the royals. But it is a dangerous time for all the reasons that we've mentioned, which is there is a general perception of the lack of transparency in the royal family and things that were allowed to go on under the roofs of the palaces. And the royal family exists with that trust from people. And if there is any perception that they can't be trusted in terms of, there's these allegations about Andrew's finances when he was out as a trade envoy and charging things to taxpayers. All of this builds up into a narrative that is extremely dangerous. And so when it comes to whether the royal family survives it, I think it is how they continue from this point onwards. But it is very hard to see how it all ends.